My name is Caleb Vance, and I'm the most famous screw-up in all of Washington, D.C. My grandfather, General Wallace Thorne, the four-star general, was dead. At his funeral at Arlington, the whole of official Washington was there. Cabinet secretaries, senators, joint chiefs, the D.C. political aristocracy. They all came. Their eyes were on me, and in their gazes, I saw 3 parts pity and 7 parts morbid curiosity. Because during the reading of the will, my accomplished cousins, the ones who had climbed the political ladder, were bequeathed multi-million-dollar trust funds, controlling shares in defense contracts and prime real estate across the city. Me? I was given 3 old, beat-up challenge coins my grandfather used to fiddle with, worn smoother than the polished marble of his headstone. A dead silence fell over the reception, followed by a wave of whispers that no one bothered to conceal. I had just become the biggest joke in the Beltway. My cousin, Governor Marcus Thorne, was the first to approach. He clapped a hand on my shoulder, his face a perfect mask of compassion. "Caleb, my condolences. The general lived a simple life. These coins were his most treasured possessions. You should take good care of them." I laughed coldly on the inside, but managed to twist my face into an expression of profound grief. "Thanks for your concern, Marcus." His younger brother, Congressman Cameron Thorne, came next. He never bothered with facades. He just sneered. "Caleb, this was the old man's way of making sure you didn't piss away the entire family fortune. He gave you 3 little trinkets to play with. Look on the bright side. When you're broke, come see me. I'll toss you a few scraps." My hand tightened around the coins, my nails digging into my palm. But I still had to force a smile. "That's a good one, Cameron." I had a violent urge to hurl the 3 worthless metal discs against the wall right then and there. But this was my grandfather's funeral. I could only stand there and take it, listening to the murmurs of mockery and the hollow words of comfort, feeling like a monkey in a cage. Just then, a quiet voice cut through the noise. "Caleb, everything from the general has its purpose." It was Nathan Thorne, the overlooked cousin, the one with no political power and 0 presence. He handed me a handkerchief. His eyes held no judgment, only a steady calm. I took it, dabbed at tears that weren't there, and gave him a slight nod. After the funeral, I drove back to my crumbling Georgetown townhouse, clutching the 3 coins like an idiot. The second the door was shut, I couldn't hold it in anymore. I hurled one of the coins at the wall, roaring, "You old bastard! Are you kidding me?" The coin hit the brick with a sharp crack and split apart. But what rolled to a stop by my foot wasn't just a piece of cheap metal. It was a cold, heavy, custom-milled half of a coin, and hidden inside was a tiny, recessed port. Protruding from it was the head of a micro-USB drive. Engraved on the metal was the insignia of a terrifying tactical beast, and a single word: Sentinel 1. I froze, the air caught in my lungs. The room was dark, save for a single beam of moonlight filtering through a grimy window pane, landing directly on the tiny object. It was half of a challenge coin, cast in a heavy tungsten alloy. This half depicted a stylized tortoise, its shell an intricate, ancient-looking pattern. On the reverse, below the USB port, was the single, engraved word, Sentinel. Imnoful. This was a command key. The Sentinel Task Force, the most elite, clandestine special operations unit in the country, tasked with protecting the continuity of government. Officially, they answered to a secret subcommittee and the president. But in reality, 3 generations of its commanders had served under my grandfather. My mind reeled. Before he died, my grandfather had gripped my hand, his voice a ragged whisper. "Caleb, I don't have much to leave you. These 3 coins, you keep them safe. Remember, unless you have no other choice, don't ever open them." At the time, I thought he was delirious, and I tearfully nodded along. Now every single word landed with the weight of a mountain. With a trembling hand, I picked up the half coin. The cold, dense metal was a grounding shock to my system. My eyes shot to the other 2 coins on the table. My heart hammered against my ribs. I practically dove for them, snatched the second one, and slammed it down on the edge of the granite countertop with all my strength. Crack! The casing shattered, and out fell another command key. Phoenix. The Phoenix Brigade. The elite of SOCOM, the tip of the spear in the Southern Hemisphere. A rapid deployment force that was the nation's shield against foreign threats from the South. My hand was shaking so badly I could barely hold the third coin. Taking a deep breath, I wedged it into a vise in my small workshop and cranked the handle. With a final, sharp snap, the third key fell squarely into my palm. Trident, the Trident Division, the spear of the nation, an entire Marine Expeditionary Unit with its own naval support group on the East Coast. Sentinel, Phoenix, and Trident. The three most powerful off-the-books military forces in the United States, accounting for over 70% of the nation's deployable special operations strength. And the highest level of command authentication for them had been hidden inside three worthless-looking challenge coins and handed to me. The screw-up everyone in D.C. had written off. My grandfather, the old man who seemed to spend his retirement tending his roses and walking his dog, a figurehead whose only remaining currency was his reputation, was a shadow commander controlling the nation's entire military nervous system. And I, Caleb Vance, D.C., S#1 Playboy, had in the span of a single night become the most powerful man in the country. I collapsed onto the floor, staring at the three command keys in my hand. They felt like they were burning through my skin. This wasn't an inheritance. This was a death sentence. 2. For the next few days, I didn't leave the house. The official story was that I was overcome with grief for my grandfather's passing and had fallen ill. In reality, I was trying to process this earth-shattering secret. Arthur, the old butler who had been with our family forever, was a man my grandfather had left to look after me. Seeing me lost in thought day after day, he grew worried. "Mr. Caleb, what's done is done. You must take care of yourself." I looked at his wrinkled, kind face and suddenly asked, "Arthur, you were with my grandfather his whole life. What kind of man? What was he really like?" Arthur paused, a flicker of memory in his cloudy eyes. "The general, sir. He was a giant, a true American hero. In his younger days, his list of victories was legendary. When he got older, he preferred the quiet life. But what? He was always worried about you, sir. He said you were too blunt, that you didn't know how to hide what you were thinking. And in a town like this, that gets you hurt." Arthur sighed. "That's why he always told people you were a lost cause. I suppose. He wanted them to underestimate you." It hit me like a physical blow. My reputation as a screw-up. Half of it was a smokescreen my grandfather had built for me, a form of protection. Had he seen all of this coming? Did he know the president's health was failing, that the battle for succession between his nephews had reached a fever pitch? Was this his way of giving me the power to protect myself in the storm that was coming? I stared at the command keys and let out a bitter laugh. This wasn't just the power to protect myself. This was the power to burn the whole damn system to the ground. "Sir, Governor Thorne and Congressman Thorne have sent over care packages. What should I do with them?" "Don't accept them." I wave my hand dismissively. "Tell them I'm too sick to see anyone. It doesn't matter who it is." They weren't sending gifts. They were probing, trying to see if the old man had left me any other assets, like his black book of contacts, the list of loyalists he'd seeded throughout the government and military for decades. Now I knew, compared to these three keys, that black book was child's play. I had to keep playing my part. The more useless I appeared, the safer I'd be. 3. 2 weeks later, I recovered. My first stop, the Gilded Cage, the most decadent and exclusive nightclub in Washington, D.C. I needed everyone in this town to know that Caleb Vance was still the same train wreck, that his grandfather's death had only made him more reckless with his money. I booked the most expensive private room, hired the most sought-after escorts, and ordered cases of the priciest champagne. Word travels fast in D.C. Before long, the door to my suite was pushed open. Congressman Cameron Thorne strolled in, his usual entourage of yes-men in tow. "Well, look what we have here. It's Caleb. Feeling better? I thought you'd be holed up for at least a year." He plopped down in the main armchair, grabbed my glass of champagne, and downed it in one go, his face a mask of contempt. I put on a drunken slur. "Hey, Cameron, a man's got to have some fun, right? Grandpa's gone. Left a whole mess behind that I can't deal with. Might as well live it up." Cameron's eyes lit up. He was testing the waters. "A mess? You mean the general's old network? They've been getting restless lately, making noise about looking out for his favorite grandson. Caleb, listen to me. Those old dinosaurs are out of your league. You can't control them. Just give me the list of names. I'll lean on them for you. Set you up for life. There it was. The fox was showing its tail. I laughed coldly to myself, but feigned a look of greedy hesitation. Cameron, I don't know. Those guys are my grandpa's best friends. Best friends, my ass. Cameron slammed his hand on the table. They're a bunch of has-beens trying to stay relevant. Caleb, don't be an idiot. Marcus is sniffing around, too. If you give the list to him, you get nothing from me. I pretended to shrink back in fear. I don't have a list. I turned his whole study upside down. There was nothing but a bunch of old military history books. Cameron stared hard into my eyes, trying to see if I was lying. I met his gaze with the perfect blend of stupidity and cowardice you'd expect from a spoiled brat. After a long moment, he grunted, apparently convinced. I guess you wouldn't have the guts to lie to me. Forget it. Let's drink. Thinking he had me figured out, he started boasting about all the things he would do when he finally made his run for the White House. I just nodded along obsequiously, pouring drink after drink down my throat. An hour later, there was another knock on the door. This time, it was Governor Marcus Thorne. He maintained his usual polished, dignified demeanor. Seeing the scene, he frowned slightly. Cameron, Caleb's just gotten over an illness. How can you push him to drink like this? Cameron rolled his eyes. I'll do what I want. You're not the boss of me. Marcus ignored him and walked over to me, his voice smooth and warm. Caleb, you need to take care of your health. I know you're hurting, but you shouldn't abuse yourself like this. The general wouldn't want to see you this way. His performance was masterful, so much more sophisticated than Cameron's blunt threats. If I didn't know what a snake he was, I might have actually been moved. I let out a burp and grinned foolishly. You're right, Governor. I'm just miserable. I understand completely, Marcus sighed. Your grandfather's old colleagues have been reaching out to me frequently. They've all pledged their support on one condition. That I take good care of you. Caleb, rest assured, if you just give me your blessing, I will ensure you live a life of comfort and ease. One played the good cop, the other played the bad cop. One wanted a list of names, the other claimed the names were already his. What a pair of brothers. I slurred my words, waving my hand dismissively. Don't talk to me about this stuff. I don't get it. I'm just a screw-up. I don't care who's president, as long as I have enough money for booze and women. With that, my head slumped forward and I pretended to pass out on the table. I could hear the two brothers continue their thinly veiled arguments and attempts to sound each other out. I didn't move a muscle, but in my mind, everything was crystal clear. The show was just getting started. 4. I spent half the night throwing up after I got home from the Gilded Cage. Arthur brought me a glass of electrolyte water, his face etched with worry. Mr. Caleb, why do you insist on torturing yourself like this? I rinsed my mouth and down the glass, the salty taste flooding my senses. Arthur, I said in a low voice, if I don't, how will they ever believe I'm a completely hopeless case? Arthur froze, staring at me in shock. I didn't explain further. I just gave him an order. Starting today, I want you to start selling off the valuables in the house. The cover story is I need cash to win back my losses at the poker table. Sir, you can't. This is all you have left. Arthur pleaded. Just do it, my tone was final. And make a scene. I want the whole city to know that Caleb Vance is about to lose everything. Arthur looked at me, his expression shifting from shock to a complex understanding, finally settling into a long, weary sigh as he quietly left the room. In the days that followed, I cemented my title as es premier tragique. First, I sold off a few of my grandfather's properties outside the city. The money was gone before the week was out, lost in a high-stakes underground poker game. Then I started selling the family heirlooms, the art, the antiques. I even sold my grandfather's favorite desk, a piece of presidential history, to Cameron for a fraction of its value. Cameron was ecstatic. He thought I'd finally hit rock bottom and saw me as nothing more than a personal ATM he could exploit at will. Marcus, on the other hand, acted heartbroken. He sent people to persuade me to see the error of my ways, and even sent over some cash to help me get through this difficult time. I knew it was all a performance for my grandfather's old network, a way to show them how benevolent he was. I took his money, turned around, and spent it all at the Gilded Cage. The entire city was laughing at me. My cousins, the ones who had inherited fortunes, avoided me like the plague, terrified I'd show up asking for a handout. Only Nathan Thorne, the quiet cousin, sought me out. He ran into me on the street one day. I had just stumbled out of pawn shop, my clothes a mess, reeking of cheap whiskey. He stopped me. No argument, no lecture. He just pressed a wad of cash into my hand. Take this, and stop gambling. His voice was still quiet, but it held a note of genuine concern. I felt the thickness of the roll. It was a lot. I looked up at him. He was wearing a simple, off-the-rack suit that looked like it had seen better days. He was a thorn, but he clearly wasn't living like one. I smirked, putting on my signature Playboy grin. What's this, Nathan? Pity? Don't worry about me. I haven't hit rock bottom just yet. I tossed the money back at him. He didn't catch it. The roll hit the pavement and broke open, scattering $100 bills across the sidewalk. He gave me a long, searching look, said nothing, and walked away. I watched him go, then bent down, gathered the money, and shoved it in my pocket. Then I turned and walked right back into the poker room. But I knew, in that moment, that this man, he might just be someone I could trust. 5. I needed to know if the command keys were real. Reading about them was one thing. I had to see for myself. My target was the Sentinel Task Force. Their base was a black site in the Virginia countryside, a fortress of paranoia and security. I changed into a set of worn-out work clothes, smeared some grease on my face, and under the cover of darkness, drove out to the unmarked access road leading to the base. At the main gate, 2 guards in tactical gear stood watch, silent and imposing. I took a deep breath, pulled out the Sentinel key, held it in my palm, and walked toward them. Halt! Identify yourself. The command was sharp. In an instant, the barrels of 2 assault rifles were leveled at my chest. The cold muzzles were inches from my heart. I forced myself to stay calm, raised my hand, and opened my palm to show them the half coin. I have an urgent message for your commander, General Miller. Under the harsh glare of the floodlights, the lead guard saw what was in my hand. His face changed instantly. He stared at the key, then at me, this person who looked like a vagrant, his eyes filled with suspicion and high alert. Don't move. Wait here. He didn't dare take any chances. He turned and sprinted into the compound. A few minutes later, I heard the sound of approaching footsteps, fast and heavy. A formidable man in his 50s, wearing a field uniform and flanked by a squad of operators, strode out of the main building. General Frank Miller. He was one of my grandfather's most decorated protégés, known for his courage and unwavering loyalty. He stopped in front of me, his gaze like a laser fixed on the key in my hand. Then, from a chain around his own neck, he produced the other half of the coin. Slowly, under the stark lighting, the 2 pieces came together. Click! A perfect, seamless fit. The Sentinel tortoise was whole. The air felt thick enough to cut. Miller's breathing grew heavy, a muscle twitching in his weathered jaw. The next second, he did something that would have sent shockwaves through the entire Pentagon. He took a sharp step back, dropped to one knee, and his voice boomed across the silent compound. General Miller, reporting for duty, sir. Behind him, his entire squad fell to one knee in perfect unison, the sound of their gear a single, sharp metallic clang. Reporting for duty, sir. The chorus was a thunderclap in the night. I stood there, looking at the kneeling soldiers, these elite warriors, and a feeling of immense, terrifying power washed over me. So, this is what it felt like. I helped Miller to his feet. At ease, General, I said in a low voice. This isn't the place to talk. Miller understood immediately. He rose and respectfully escorted me into his command center. After clearing the room, he faced me again. General Thorne was a great man. I regret I couldn't be there to pay my respects. Did he have any final orders? I looked at him. His eyes were clear, his face a mask of integrity. He was trustworthy. His final order was for me to assume command of his assets, and to watch, and wait. Miller's eyes welled up. The general was a visionary. The situation in Washington is a powder keg. The president is weak, and the governor and the congressman are at each other's throats. The Capitol could erupt at any moment. You taking command now. You're the only thing that can keep the lid on. General, for now, my ditty is D. C. S number 1 screw up. I need your help to maintain that cover. Miller looked confused for a second, then realization dawned on his face. He nodded firmly. I understand, sir. You're running your father's playbook. A feint. Don't worry. You give the order, and the 5,000 operators of the Sentinel Task Force will walk through fire for you. I nodded. With Frank Miller and the Sentinel secure, the first piece on the chessboard was mine. As I left the base, I looked back at the sprawling, shadowy compound. All the confusion and fear I'd felt was gone. Grandfather, don't you worry. I won't let what you built turn to dust. And I won't let this country fall into the hands of petty, power-hungry men. 6. To make my downward spiral completely convincing, I did something that rocked the D.C. establishment. I sold my father's house, the Vance family estate in Georgetown. It was a historic landmark, the face of our family's legacy. The moment the news broke, my extended family went ballistic. A few of the elder cousins stormed into the small apartment I was renting, pointing fingers and screaming at me, calling me a disgrace and threatening to formally disown me. I just leaned back in my chair, picking my teeth with a matchstick. It's sold. What are you going to do about it? If you care so much, pool your money and buy it back. They fumed, but my complete lack of shame defeated them. They left in a huff. The buyer was Congressman Cameron Thorne. He bought it for a song, practically stealing it, then had the audacity to tell the press he was merely holding it in trust to prevent a historic home from falling into the hands of strangers. On the day he took possession, he threw a massive party at the estate, inviting half of D.C.'s elite. It wasn't a housewarming. It was a victory lap. He sent me an invitation. Of course I went. I showed up in a wrinkled suit that looked like I'd slept in it. Cameron's new butler, seeing me, curled his lip in disgust and blocked my way. Mr. Vance, the congressman has requested that you use the side entrance, so as not to disturb the other guests. I just smiled, said nothing, and pulled a piece of paper from my pocket. It was an IOU. Last year, the congressman borrowed $50,000 from me. Said he'd pay it back by the end of the year. Well, it's spring now. I think it's time he settled up, don't you? The butler's face turned pale. The nearby guests craned their necks, their ears perked. Cameron's habit of borrowing money and his tight-fisted nature were open secrets. But no one thought I'd have the nerve to call him out in public at his own party. The butler panicked. Mr. Vance, please, right this way, sir. No need to get upset over such a small matter. I folded the IOU and strolled through the front door. Inside, Cameron saw me and his face turned to stone. But in front of everyone, he couldn't lose his cool. He forced a smile. Caleb, you came. I thought you wouldn't be able to bear seeing your old home. I picked up a glass of champagne from a passing tray and downed it. Don't be silly, Cameron. Out with the old, in with the new. Besides, a house like this needs someone with your stature to really make it shine. Hearing me submit, his mood improved. He clapped me on the shoulder. Glad you see it that way. Stick with me, Caleb. I'll take care of you. Just then, Governor Marcus Thorne appeared, his face a mask of sorrow. Caleb, how did you do this? This house was your family's foundation. I rolled my eyes. A foundation? Governor, if you can't trade a foundation for a hot meal, what good is it? My response left Marcus speechless. I ignored them both and proceeded to eat and drink my way through the party. Everyone looked at me like I was a clown. Pathetic, tragic, laughable. They had no idea that as they networked and schemed for power in these halls, the estate's true master was watching them, seeing them all for the fools they were. The feeling, I had to admit, was pretty damn good. Halfway through the party, an unexpected arrival shattered the polite facade. A Secret Service agent entered, his voice cutting through the chatter. A directive from the president. Governor Thorne, Congressman Thorne, and Mr. Caleb Vance are to report to the White House immediately. When he said my name, the entire room went silent. The president was critically ill and hadn't been seen in public for months. Why would he suddenly summon anyone, let alone a worthless degenerate like me? Marcus and Cameron exchanged a look, their eyes filled with suspicion and alarm. I was just as surprised, but I hid it, putting on a look of terrified confusion as I was escorted to a black SUV with my cousins. The White House, the Oval Office. The heavy scent of antiseptic and medicine hit me as soon as I walked in. The president was lying in a hospital bed that had been moved into the office, his face gaunt, his breathing shallow. He looked like he could go at any moment. The three of us stood before him, not daring to breathe too loudly. Please, you can relax, the president said, his voice raspy and weak. We murmured our thanks. The president's gaze drifted past Marcus and Cameron, finally landing on me. You're Wallace's grandson, Caleb. Yes, Mr. President. Caleb Vance, I said, my voice trembling appropriately. Wallace Thorne was a great patriot, the president wheezed, pausing to cough. His passing leaves a great void. Father, you need to rest, Marcus and Cameron said in near unison. The president ignored them, his eyes still fixed on me. I heard. You sold his house. The estate he left you. My heart leaped into my throat. Yes. Yes, sir. I was foolish. Foolish doesn't begin to describe it. The president's voice rose, triggering another violent coughing fit. That house is a national treasure. You degenerate. I dropped my knees, trembling. Cameron immediately stepped forward. Father, please calm down. Caleb is young and reckless. I've already purchased the estate. I'm simply holding it for him until he comes to his senses. Marcus was quick to follow. Father, it was a moment of weakness. For General Thorne's sake, please forgive him this once. They were tripping over themselves to defend me, each trying to look like the bigger man in front of their dying father. The president took a long time to catch his breath. He waved them away. His gaze fell on me again, but this time it was different. Complicated. Caleb, come here. I shuffled forward on my knees until I was beside his bed. He reached out a withered hand and gripped my arm. His strength was almost non-existent. He leaned close, his voice so low only I could hear it. Did Wallace leave you anything else? In that single instant, my blood ran cold. The president was asking me what my grandfather had left me. What did he mean? The keys? Did he know? Or was this a shot in the dark? Cold sweat soaked through my shirt in seconds. My mind was racing. I couldn't admit it. Absolutely not. The moment I did, I would become the next Wallace Thorne, a man so powerful he made the President of the United States lose sleep at night. The old man might not have the strength to do anything to me, but his sons would tear me to pieces. I had to play dumb. Perfectly, flawlessly dumb. I looked up, my face a mask of bewildered terror. Anything else? Mr. President, my grandfather only left me 3 old challenge coins. Nothing else, I swear. The president's cloudy eyes stared into mine, as if trying to excavate the truth from my very soul. I met his gaze, my own eyes filled with nothing but pure, unadulterated fear. A true screw-up would be terrified, and nothing else. The silence stretched on, so long I thought I might actually pass out. Finally, he let go of my arm and waved a tired hand. Never mind. It was just a thought. You're dismissed. Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. President. I scrambled out of the Oval Office like a man escaping a fire. Outside, Marcus and Cameron were waiting. What did he say to you? Cameron grabbed me by the collar, his voice a low growl. Nothing. He just yelled at me. Call me a degenerate. I stammered. Is that all? Cameron clearly didn't believe me. Caleb. Marcus stepped forward, pulling Cameron's hand away. His tone was gentle, but the pressure behind it was immense. The president keeping you behind was significant. It would be in your best interest to tell us exactly what was said. The consequences of lying are not something you want to experience. I looked like I was about to burst into tears. I honestly don't know. He just asked if Grandpa left me anything else. I told him about the 3 coins, and then he sent me away. I swear, please, just leave me alone. My pathetic display seemed to work. Marcus and Cameron exchanged a look, a mixture of suspicion and disappointment. Maybe they'd concluded that their father was just as senile as they'd hoped, wasting his last breaths on a lost cause like me. They didn't press me further and left, each lost in his own thoughts. I stood alone in the quiet White House hallway. A cool breeze drifted through an open window, and I realized my shirt was completely soaked through. The president's question was like a splinter in my mind. He suspected something. This city was far more dangerous than I had ever imagined. I had to accelerate my plans. 9. I had verified the Sentinel key. Now it was time for Phoenix and Trident. Those units were stationed hundreds, even thousands of miles away. I couldn't go myself. I called Arthur into my study. Arthur, you are my grandfather's most trusted friend. There are things I can no longer hide from you. I told him everything. The 3 keys, my grandfather's plan, all of it. When I finished, Arthur was on his knees, tears streaming down his face. The general, that brilliant man, and I was a blind old fool. Forgive me, Mr. Caleb. Get up, Arthur. I helped him to his feet. I need your help. I need 2 people, absolutely loyal, to travel to Florida and Virginia to verify these keys. Arthur wiped his tears and nodded firmly. Of course, sir. The general had a few special assets, men with unique skills, completely devoted to him, living under deep cover as household staff. I'll bring them at once. A few minutes later, 2 unassuming men who worked as groundskeepers were brought into the room. One was named Al, the other Ben. They were quiet, but their eyes were sharp, and their hardened physiques hinted at a life far from gardening. I gave them the Phoenix and Trident keys and explained their missions in detail. This is of the utmost importance. There can be no mistakes. When you meet the commanders and authenticate the keys, you relay one message and one message only. Stand by for the signal. Understood, they said in unison. They secured the keys, and without another word, vanished into the night. With them gone, I could finally breathe a little easier. Now all I had to do was wait. In the meantime, I continued to play my part. After selling the estate, I was sitting on a large sum of cash. I used it to open a new business in a derelict warehouse district. An underground, no-holds-barred MMA fight club. The move solidified my reputation as a complete degenerate. Everyone thought I was insane, throwing away a life of privilege to become a fight promoter. Governor Marcus sent an aide to reason with me. Caleb, if you need money, I can help you. You don't have to resort to such a vulgar enterprise. It's an embarrassment to the family name. I had the aide thrown out. Tell the governor I like watching people bleed. It's a free country. Congressman Cameron, however, loved it. He came to the opening night, tossing a stack of cash into the pot for the main event. He threw his arm around my shoulder, laughing. Caleb, you magnificent bastard. You truly are a natural-born screw-up. This is exactly the kind of man I can work with. I knew that the more he saw me as a lost cause, the less he would ever see me as a threat. My fight club, officially a den of vice, secretly became my primary intelligence gathering operation. It was a crossroads for everyone from city officials and political aides to off-duty cops and underworld figures. A gambler's drunken boast, a lobbyist's whispered complaint. These things often revealed more about the true state of affairs in D.C. than any official briefing. I spent my nights in a private skybox overlooking the cage, sipping whiskey, listening to the roar of the crowd, while my people fed me a constant stream of information. Which one of Marcus's aides was meeting with which journalist? How many untraceable firearms Cameron's chief of staff had just purchased for his personal security? Which Secret Service agent had a gambling problem? A vast, invisible web was spreading out from my grimy little fight club, covering the entire city. And I was the spider at its center, watching and waiting. 10. A month later, Al and Ben returned. They were road-weary, but their eyes were bright with success. Sir, they both said, kneeling. The commander of the Phoenix Brigade, General Martinez, authenticates the key. He says the 30,000 operators of SOUTCOM await your command. The commander of the Trident Division, Admiral Cole, authenticates the key. He says the entire Marine Expeditionary Unit is yours to command. They are ready to die for you. I let out a long, slow breath. The last weight had been lifted from my shoulders. The nation's most powerful military assets were at my fingertips. I, Caleb Vance, at 20-something years old, was the most powerful secret commander in the history of the United States. But I felt no joy, only the crushing weight of responsibility and danger. Arthur, I turned to the old butler. It's time. Activate Cicada. Arthur's body went rigid. A sharp light glinted in his eyes. Mr. Caleb, are you certain? Once Cicada is active, there is no going back. I'm certain. Cicada was my grandfather's final trump card. It was a nationwide intelligence network with assets embedded in every branch of government, every industry, even within the White House itself. The network had been lying dormant for years, waiting to be awakened by the holder of the 3 keys. My grandfather used to say that military power is a sword. It can kill your enemies, but it can also cut you. Intelligence is the eyes of the swordsman. A swordsman without eyes, no matter how sharp his blade, is just a fool swinging in the dark. With my order, countless dormant assets, the cicadas buried deep underground began to stir. An even larger, more sophisticated intelligence network began to word to life. The information flowing to me was no longer street-level gossip, but top-secret intelligence from the highest levels of power. I learned that the president's condition was terminal. He was being kept alive by a cocktail of experimental drugs and wouldn't last the winter. I learned that Governor Marcus had made a secret deal with the director of the Secret Service, promising him the head of the CIA in exchange for his loyalty. I learned that Congressman Cameron, through his corporate connections, had quietly moved a private army of 300 mercenaries into the D.C. area, hiding them in safe houses. The storm was about to break. Washington, D.C. had become a powder keg. All it needed was a single spark. And I, holding the power to blow the whole thing sky high, had to keep running my fight club, pretending to be a man who cared for nothing but violence and money. The feeling was surreal, like a grandmaster of chess pretending to be a child who barely knows how the pieces move, while all around him, amateurs plot and scheme, thinking they're in control. I was waiting for the right moment, waiting for all of them to make their moves, to reveal their ugliest, most desperate self for the entire world to see. 11. The moment came sooner than I expected. On the day of the first snow, a coded message came from the Cicada network. The president was dead. The news was locked down tighter than Fort Knox, but I knew instantly. And at almost the same moment, Governor Marcus and Congressman Cameron both made their moves. D.C. descended into chaos. The Secret Service, loyal to Marcus, declared a state of emergency, locking down the city, ostensibly for national security after the president's death. But in reality, Marcus now controlled all movement in and out of the capital. Meanwhile, Cameron's private army of mercenaries materialized out of nowhere. Dressed in black tactical gear, they launched a coordinated assault on the White House and other key federal buildings. Gunfire and explosions echoed through the night. I stood on the roof of my fight club, watching the distant glow of fires in the direction of the National Mall. Arthur stood behind me, his voice tight with anxiety. "Sir, they're making their move. We have to—" "Not yet," I said, calmly sipping my tea. "Let them fight. Let the dogs tear each other apart. When they're both bleeding and exhausted, that's when we make our entrance." My club, located in a forgotten part of the city and owned by a harmless degenerate, was, for the moment, completely off everyone's radar. But it didn't take long for someone to remember me. The first to arrive were Cameron's men. A team of heavily armed mercenaries stormed the building. Their leader, a man I recognized as Cameron's head of security, kicked open the door to my skybox. "Caleb Vance, the congressman wants to see you. Now." His tone made it clear this wasn't an invitation. I slowly set down my cup. "And where are we going?" "The main event is just about to start. I am Busse." The commander sneered. "Cut the crap, Vance. We know your grandfather left you his black book, the real one with all his assets. The congressman said if you hand it over, you can name your price. If not, we do this the hard way." Behind him, his men raised their weapons. I smiled. So the masks were finally off. Before I could answer, the door was kicked in again. Another team of armed men stormed in. These were Secret Service agents, led by one of Marcus's top deputies. "Hold it right there. Mr. Vance is under the protection of Governor Thorne. You're not authorized to be here." Cameron's man paled. "The Secret Service? What is this? Is the governor trying to start a war with the congressman?" The agent in charge scoffed. "Mr. Vance has seen the light and pledged his loyalty to the governor. I suggest you and your men leave immediately before this gets ugly." The two groups stood in a tense standoff in my office, weapons leveled, inches from starting a firefight. They both saw me as a prize, a key that could unlock the loyalty of General Thorne's old network. Neither of them had the slightest clue that what I held wasn't a list of names. It was the army that could grind them both into dust. "What's all the noise about?" I stood up lazily, stretching as I interrupted their standoff. "You both want what my grandfather left me, right? Is it really that big of a deal? Worth pulling guns over?" The mercenary commander and the Secret Service agent stared at me, stunned. The commander spoke first, his voice urgent. "Vance, you're ready to hand it over? Good. Give it to me. The congressman will make you a rich man." The agent quickly added, "Mr. Vance, don't be a fool. The congressman is a violent thug. Only the governor can guarantee your safety and future. I walked between them, looking from one to the other, a grin on my face. If I give it to you, what's in it for me? A cabinet position, the mercenary promised. Secretary of whatever you want. An ambassadorship, the agent countered. Anywhere in the world, with full diplomatic immunity for life. Fisk, TSK, I shook my head. Both very tempting offers. But there's just one problem. My grandfather only left me one thing. How do I split it? I held out my hand. In my palm were the 3 challenge coins, which I had glued back together. They looked as worthless as ever. Both men frowned, their faces etched with contempt. Are you playing games with us, Vance? That's the key. Stop wasting our time. Hand over the real list. I sighed dramatically. I guess you won't believe me until you see for yourselves. I picked up one of the coins, the Sentinel coin, and tapped it lightly on the corner of my desk. It split open, and a half with a micro USB drive rolled out. I picked it up, walked to the window, and whistled 3 short, sharp notes. It was the signal I had arranged with General Miller. The response was immediate. The ground outside began to shake with the thunder of armored vehicles and the rhythmic pounding of boots. The mercenaries and agents surrounding my building were thrown into chaos, their formations instantly broken. Hundreds of operators in the black tactical gear of the Sentinel Task Force swarmed the area like a tidal wave, surrounding the Fight Club, securing it in seconds. General Frank Miller, in full combat attire, strode into my office. In his hand, he held the other half of the Sentinel coin. He ignored everyone else in the room, walked straight to me, and raised his half of the coin. He joined it with mine, a perfect fit. Then he dropped to one knee, his voice a force of nature. General Miller reporting, sir. Apologies for the delay. Behind him, in the hallway and down the stairs, every single Sentinel operator dropped to one knee. Sentinels, reporting for duty. The roar shook the entire building. The Fight Club fell into a dead, shocked silence. The mercenary commander and the Secret Service agent. Their faces cycled through shock, disbelief, and finally, abject terror. They stared at me as if they were seeing a ghost. They couldn't comprehend how this degenerate, this playboy, this screw-up, could be the commander of the Sentinel Task Force. I played with the now complete Sentinel coin in my hand, walked over to them, and smiled. Now, I asked, are you sure you still want what my grandfather left me? The mercenary and the agent were paralyzed with fear, slumped on the floor, unable to speak. I had no time to waste on them. Tie them up, I said with a wave of my hand. Miller nodded and his men went to work. I walked to the window and looked out at the city. The sounds of fighting between my cousin's forces still echoed in the distance. Miller, my orders. Sir. 1. Take control of all bridges and major intersections. Secure the capital. Any resistance is to be met with overwhelming force. 2. Surround the White House and all federal buildings held by my cousin's forces. Disarm them. I want prisoners, not casualties. 3. Send a team to the home of Nathan Thorne. Bring him to the White House, unharmed. Emphasize that he is a guest, not a prisoner. He is to be treated with the utmost respect. The orders flowed from me, clear and concise. Miller's eyes gleamed with admiration. He snapped a salute and rushed off to execute them. In a matter of minutes, the situation in D.C. was turned on its head. The chaotic streets were swiftly brought under the control of the Sentinel Task Force. The mercenaries and compromised agents, faced with this overwhelming force of elite operators, threw down their weapons without a fight. The skirmishes at the White House ended just as quickly. Marcus and Cameron, my ambitious cousins, had been so focused on fighting each other that they never saw the third player entering the game. They had been outmaneuvered, their plans shattered by the one person they had never, ever considered a threat. When they were escorted out of their respective command posts and brought before me in my Fight Club, their faces were masks of pure disbelief. Caleb, it was you. Cameron pointed at me, his face purple with rage. You can't do this. This is treason. Marcus was calmer, but his eyes were filled with a cold, terrifying hatred. I have to hand it to you, Caleb. I truly underestimated you. You hit it well. I was sitting in an armchair, tossing the other 2 coins in my hand. We all have our secrets, don't we, cousins? I said, looking at them as if they were insects. One of you makes a deal with the Secret Service, the other raises a private army. Did you really think no one would notice? Their faces went white. I took one of the coins, and in front of them, crushed it in my fist. The Phoenix key fell to the floor. I crushed the last one. The Trident key landed beside it. I forgot to mention, I said, picking up the 2 keys. My grandfather left me more than just the Sentinels. The 30,000 operators of the Phoenix Brigade, the entire Trident Marine Expeditionary Unit. They're all mine. So tell me. I leaned forward, my voice dropping to a whisper. If I wanted to be president, don't you think it would be a hell of a lot easier for me than it would be for either of you? Marcus and Cameron Thorne finally broke. They collapsed to the floor, their faces slack, their eyes empty. They had lost, utterly and completely. Defeated by the family screw-up they had never once taken seriously. The White House, the Oval Office. The place had been scrubbed clean. The signs of the brief, violent struggle were gone. The only lingering trace was the faint smell of antiseptic. I was sitting in the resolute desk chair, the one meant for a president. It was, okay, a little stiff. Nathan Thorne was shown in. He saw me sitting there, and for a moment he just stared. But then, a look of understanding crossed his face. There was no shock, just a quiet acceptance as he stood before the desk. Caleb, what is going on? I stood up, walked around the desk, and placed the 3 command keys on the polished wood between us. This is what's going on. Nathan looked at the 3 keys, the symbols of ultimate military authority in the nation. He was silent for a long time. Finally, he spoke. What are you going to do? Are you taking over? I laughed. Do I look like presidential material to you? Waking up before dawn for briefings, reading mountains of policy papers, dealing with a Congress full of snakes? That sounds like hell on earth. Nathan looked at me, his expression unreadable. Then what? My grandfather, General Wallace Thorne, spent his life serving this country. He gave me this power not so I could stage a coup, but so I could make sure the country was left in the hands of a true leader. I met his eyes, my voice steady. Nathan, the person I choose is you. He was stunned. He looked up, his eyes wide with disbelief. Me? Why me? Because when everyone else was laughing at me, you were the only one who showed me a moment of human kindness. Because when I was at my lowest, selling off my family's legacy, you were the only one willing to give me the money out of your own pocket, even after I threw it back in your face. And most importantly, I paused, because I've had you looked into. You may be a thorn, but you actually care about people. You lobbied 3 times to get disaster relief funds for hurricane victims, only to be blocked by Marcus and Cameron. You risked your political career to help a constituent who was being crushed by a corrupt corporation. Nathan, all the other powerful people in this town want to be president. You're the only one I've found who actually wants to do the job. If you don't take this seat, who is qualified to? Nathan's eyes began to redden. He looked at me, his lips parted, but no words came out. I clapped him on the shoulder. Don't get emotional yet. This isn't going to be easy. Marcus and Cameron have loyalists buried all over the government. It's a huge mess for you to clean up. But don't worry, I said, sweeping the 3 keys back into my pocket. I've got you back. No one will dare to move against you. You run the country. I'll watch the walls. A partnership. Nathan took a deep breath. Then, he bowed his head in a gesture of profound respect. Caleb, I, Nathan Thorne, will not fail you. And I will not fail this country. In that moment, I saw the birth of a president. 15. A month later, a new president was inaugurated. Nathan Thorne became the new leader of the free world. His first act was to promise an era of unity and reform. Marcus and Cameron Thorne were stripped of their titles and assets, forced into a quiet, permanent retirement from public life. Their networks were systematically dismantled. Washington was given a clean slate, and I, Caleb Vance, was offered the highest civilian honor, the Presidential Medal of Freedom, and any cabinet post I desired. I turned them all down. I asked the new president for only one thing, a full, unconditional pardon for any and all past, present, and future indiscretions. He granted it with a laugh. On the day of the inauguration, in a private meeting, I formally presented the 3 command keys to President Thorne. Mr. President, I said, ultimate military authority belongs to the Commander-in-Chief. I am returning what is rightfully yours. The gravity of the moment was not lost on him. He knew what a transfer of power this truly was. The look in his eyes was one of deep, unwavering respect. President Thorne took the keys, looked at them for a long moment, and then he placed them back in my hand. Caleb, he said, I trust you more than I trust myself. The nation's shields remain in your care. We're in this together. Partners. I didn't refuse. I knew this was the ultimate expression of his trust and my ultimate responsibility to the nation. 16. 3 years into President Thorne's first term, the nation was stable, prosperous, and healing. Under his leadership, the country was entering a new golden age. And I, Caleb Vance, went back to being a screw-up. I still hated morning meetings. I slept in until noon. I reopened my MMA fight club, bigger and louder than ever. It became the hottest ticket in town. I was still a regular at the Gilded Cage, enjoying the music and the vintage whiskey. The only difference was no one looked at me like I was a waste of space anymore. The escorts at the club would blush when I walked by. The high rollers at the poker tables would respectfully call me Mr. Vance. The political elites who once scorned me now tripped over themselves to say hello. My old family estate, the one Cameron had stolen from me, was returned by presidential order. I had everything that was thrown out, and I left the place empty, visiting only occasionally to walk the grounds. One day, I ran into the elder cousins who had once called me a disgrace. They saw me and looked as if they'd seen a ghost, about to fall over themselves to show their respect. I waved them off. Still getting by all right? Yes, Mr. Vance. Thanks to you. We're doing well, very well. I smiled, pulled a checkbook from my jacket, and wrote them a substantial check. Here, fix up the family cemetery. Our ancestors shouldn't have to rest under leaking mausoleums. They took the check, tears in their eyes, too choked up to speak. I just shook my head and walked away. Being a screw-up was a pretty good life. The difference was before I hadn't earned it. Now I had. 17. It was a perfect afternoon. I was lounging on a sofa in my skybox at the Fight Club, listening to my manager go over the month's profits. An aide from the White House burst in, out of breath. Mr. Vance. Sir, it's an emergency. The president. I didn't even open my eyes. What now? Did he get into another argument with the Speaker of the House? Nathan was a great president, but he was stubborn, especially when it came to his policies. He was constantly butting heads with the old guard in Congress. No, sir. The aide was nearly in tears. A rogue state has launched a surprise attack on our fleet in the Pacific. The Pentagon is in chaos. They're saying the carrier group is crippled. My eyes snapped open. I sat up straight. The rogue state had been a thorn in the world's side for years. My grandfather had once put them in their place so firmly they hadn't dared to make a move for a decade. Now, they had chosen this moment to strike back. The intel. The aide handed me a tablet with the encrypted report. I scanned it, my face growing grim. This was a well-planned, sophisticated attack. They had used a new type of hypersonic missile. They were aggressive, and they had drawn first blood. Where's the president? He's been in the Situation Room with the Joint Chiefs for the last hour. They're locked in debate. I stood up and tossed the financial report to my manager. Cancel tonight's fights. I have to go to the office. While I walked into the White House Situation Room, wearing jeans and a leather jacket, the room fell silent. President Thorne was standing over a massive display screen with a group of 4-star generals, his face a mask of grim frustration. When he saw me, it was like a wave of relief washed over him. Caleb, thank God you're here. I nodded and walked to the screen. What's the situation? An old admiral sighed. Mr. Vance, their attack was devastating. Our response is being hampered by politics and red tape. Their main fleet is now advancing, and they're threatening to blockade our allies. We're looking at a full-blown international crisis. Another general added, the Trident and Phoenix forces are on opposite sides of the globe. It will take days to redeploy them. We don't have days. The room was thick with tension and despair. I looked at the map, at the enemy fleet's bold advance, and a cold smile touched my lips. Who says we need to redeploy? I reached into my pocket and pulled out the 3 heavy, worn challenge coins. I slapped them down on the table. The sound echoed in the silent room. Mr. President, authorize a full decapitation strike. Give me 12 hours. Within 12 hours, I will personally ensure that their 30-ship fleet is at the bottom of the ocean. 18. My plan was simple and completely insane. I wasn't going to engage in a conventional naval battle. I was going to get the president to authorize a joint operation under my personal direct command. President Thorne would hold down the fort in D.C., managing the political fallout and logistics. I would take the Sentinel Task Force's stealth insertion assets, a squadron of B-21 bombers armed with the newest ordnance, and a hunter-killer submarine from the Trident Division. We weren't going to meet their fleet. We were going to their capital city. We were going to bypass their navy entirely and take out their command and control. A classic checkmate. It was an unbelievable gamble. If I succeeded, their military would be thrown into chaos, their fleet left blind and defenseless. If I failed, the United States would be seen as having committed a shocking act of aggression, potentially triggering a much wider war. Everyone in the Situation Room, except for Nathan, said it was too risky. But President Thorne, silencing them all, chose to trust me. Our nation's security and my presidency is in your hands, he said, clapping me on the shoulder before I left. I just grinned. Don't worry. Just have a bottle of your best bourbon waiting for me when I get back. The operation launched. I was in a command bunker deep underground, wearing the same headset my grandfather had once worn, directing a symphony of destruction thousands of miles away. The people of America went to sleep that night worried about a looming war. They might never know who the screw-up Playboy Caleb Vance really was, but they knew their president was steady at the helm. The battle was short, brutal, and precise. Our forces moved like ghosts. The enemy's advanced warning systems, their entire chain of command, was dismantled in less than an hour. Their leadership was neutralized. The news hit their fleet at dawn. Their command was gone. Their country was in chaos. Their will to fight evaporated. The fleet turned and ran. And, waiting for them, just over the horizon, was the rest of the U.S. Navy and the full force of the Phoenix Brigade's air power. The hunt was on. When I returned to the White House, the crisis averted, President Thorne was waiting for me on the Truman balcony. That day, the news praised the president's bold and decisive action. I stood in the shadows, watching the man I had put in power, and I felt a quiet sense of peace. Maybe this was my grandfather's real plan all along. Not for me to rule, not for me to protect myself, but simply to serve, to be a guardian, to protect this country and its people. I looked at Nathan, his face filled with relief and gratitude, and suddenly, the life of a playboy seemed a little less appealing. Being a hero just once in a while. It wasn't so bad. Of course, only once in a while. At the private celebration that night, I got incredibly drunk. The next day, I submitted my official resignation from my informal, non-existent post. Mr. President, I'm tired. I want a vacation. You should probably hold on to these. I offered him the keys. Nathan looked at me, a long silence between us, and finally sighed. All right, I know I can't keep you here, but you're keeping the keys. I'm giving you an extended leave of absence. Go wherever you want. Do whatever you want. Just promise me one thing. What's that? No matter where you go, come back to D.C. at least once a year, so I know you're okay. I looked at him, at his sincere, worried eyes, and I smiled. You got it. It's a deal. In the end, I never gave up the keys. I became the most powerful and the most invisible man in the country. I left D.C. and started traveling. I went south and saw the Phoenix Brigade train in the swamps. I went east and sailed on a Trident nuclear submarine. I saw every corner of the country, from the deserts of the west to the forests of the northeast. I was still the same irreverent screw-up, getting into trouble wherever I went. But everyone in the know understood that the United States had a guardian angel. He might be a smartass, he might be a degenerate, but if his country ever needed him, he would always be there, because in his pocket, he always carried 3 old, beat-up challenge coins.